Mohassess's works remain rare because we don't know where the majority are. And after the revolution, a lot of the works that were in Iran were destroyed by the government because they were seen as heretic works. There isn't enough out there about Mohassess to really understand the depth of his body of work and the importance he carries. And I think the rarity around his work also helped build a bit of the myth around him.
Sotheby's is the temporary custodian of some of the world's most rare, remarkable and coveted art and objects. In each episode, we'll be exploring the significance and journey of an extraordinary work told by those who know it best. This is The Specialist. On today's episode, Heritage on a Mission. Ashkan Baghestani recounts his quest to trace and recontextualise the scattered corpus of artist Bahman Mohassess, and, in doing so, to restore him to his rightful place in the history of Middle Eastern art. Ashkan is head of Contemporary Art Day Sale in New York. His knowledge of modern and contemporary Arab, Iranian and Turkish works has been invaluable to cultivating this growing collecting field at Sotheby's. Let's join Ashkan now with more.
So the story we're going to focus on today is really my discovery, passion and obsession almost with one of the greatest Iranian artists, Bahman Mohassess, who has had a huge impact on my career, but also had a huge impact in the art scene from the region and now internationally. Bahman Mohassess was born in 1931 in Rasht in Iran, which is north of the country, close to the Caspian Sea. He is considered as one of the most radical artists from the entire region at a time where there was a lot of focus on abstraction, calligraphy. He really focused on realism, surrealism, and figuration. Mohassess was quite tortured, and the main themes really around human condition, war, unrest, sexuality, and really about his time and place in this world and what that meant. And that's why he actually referenced Greek and Roman mythology. He was deeply, deeply influenced by his readings and by his time in Italy. Mythological tales and creatures had a huge place in his body of work. But also because he came from the north and close to the Caspian Sea, he was very concerned by environmental issues. So you'll see also a huge theme around animals, decay, and destruction. So there were direct sort of connections and synergies between all those themes. He also is an artist who has come to be discovered very late. He's painted little. A lot of it has been either destroyed or lost. Taking care of these paintings brought a lot of anxiety, and as a result, he destroyed himself a lot of the works, which is very sad, because he didn't think people were interested in them, because he felt that by destroying them, he could move on from specific periods of his life. Post-revolution Iran, a lot of works were lost, destroyed, and we've lost track of a lot of great masterpieces. You'll see that a lot of biographies for artists in the Middle East are directly tied with political instability. He left Iran in the 50s after a revolutionary coup with the prime minister back then. So that's when he decided to actually move in 1954 at the age of 23 to Rome to study at the Fine Art Academy. He ended up having a dual nationality between Italy and Iran. He was fascinated with all the great old master painters, the Italian Renaissance. So his world really opened up, and I think that's where he started really integrating some of those key themes into his works and inform his distinctive style. After that, he went back to Iran, where he had his first few shows at Gallery Borghese and a few other galleries, and that is a time where Iran had a blossoming cultural environment. Tehran had become a huge cultural hub. He realized very soon that he didn't want to be part of that new generation of artists because he didn't feel attached to their language. A group of 5 artists had formed the first modern art movement in Iran, which were called the Sa'khane artists. And that was bridging some sort of Persian traditions with Shia iconography and bringing sort of a pop element to it. But there was a lot of abstraction. It was quite esoteric. He wanted to stick to figuration, and he wanted to stick to what he had learned back in Italy. So he left because he felt that that wasn't the right place for him, even though the Shah Banu, the Empress of Iran, had actually promoted his works, commissioned a lot of the works. And prior to the revolution in Iran, in most public squares or in institutions, you would see a lot of his works, actually, that she had acquired for the governmental institutions. So he kept going back and forth between Italy and Iran, and that is where we see a huge radical shift in his works. And early to mid-60s up to mid-70s is the key period for Bahman Mohassess. That is what the market has been very much focused on. That is considered his magnum opus period. Minotaur Morante, Dying Minotaur, is part of his 60s Minotaur series, which are considered his most important. I think the Minotaur was a direct reflection of himself, sort of an analogy for his life and his deeply tortured soul. And here you have a horizontal painting, about 150 centimeter, where you have a dying Minotaur with his teeth out, with his horns on the floor. You see his flesh, you see his skin. He's in pain. A lot of Mohassess's Minotaurs are either lying on a beach, I think reminiscing of his childhood by the Caspian Sea, or simply floating in void. There's a lot of texture, and I think that's one of the key components of 60s works. I think reminiscent of his studies of Roman Catholic and Renaissance churches, where he creates this sort of stucco effect of layering to really give the sense of human flesh and almost like they're breathing and living. This was a painting that up to 2014-15 wasn't really known to the public. It is hands down the top 3 best Mohassesses I've seen in my career. I was talking to a dear friend and a curator in Paris, I think it was 2015 or 16, and that is where he showed me this painting. I was trying to convince the owner to bring it to auction or to sell it privately, and he wasn't ready. And a year and a half ago, he reached out to me proactively and said, listen, I'm ready. I think it's time for me to let it go. But the condition, it needs to go to either a public collection or a collection that will do it justice. So that is where we started approaching key institutions. And that is sort of a 10-year journey, basically. We managed to place the work in the permanent collection of the Metropolitan Art Museum in New York. The whole negotiation, the whole process took close to 8 months. It is one of the most exciting moments of my career. Fast forward 2017-18, I have an old colleague of mine in Italy who reaches out saying, I have these friends outside Naples who have inherited a group of Mohassess works, 11 works between sculptures, paintings, and works on paper. It's the kind of call anyone dreams of. When they share the images and information and provenance, I was on the edge of my seat because 2 of those works I've been looking for years. We had lost complete track of them. And the works belong to the Bruni family. The grandfather had established one of the great foundries in Italy, the Bruni Foundry. And when Mohassess started developing an interest in sculpture, most of his sculptures were founded in the Bruni Foundry. But like many artists, during a revolution and in a moment of panic, even though he technically lived between Iran and Italy, left the works there. There was a lot of debate, because the grandfather was no longer alive, to understand if they were sold, if they were purchased, if they were gifted. So I started conducting some research and I started reaching out. That was also, by pure coincidence, a time where I started establishing a stronger and closer relationship to the nieces. Bahman Mohassess did not have any kids, so there are no heirs to his estate. And the 2 only relatives are his 2 nieces. Mohassess died poor in the outskirts of Rome. They confirmed to me that these actually belonged to the artist and he had never sold them, he just left it there. And that was an interesting parallel because my grandfather was Italian, lived in Iran for 20 years. He was an artist. And after the revolution, he just left everything there. And only 30 years after, when I went back, I discovered at a collector's home 15 of his sculptures in their garden that were just left there. It creates this sort of lack of provenance because you're not really sure how then they exchange hands or where did they end up going. And the Brunis had 3 generations between the grandfather, their father, and themselves. So Sotheby's ended up negotiating on behalf of the Mohassess family and the Bruni family a sort of agreement of co-ownership because neither side could technically prove with any formal documentation their ownership. So they agreed to split the ownership 50-50, and as a result, selling the works at auction publicly, which they entrusted Sotheby's to do. The first work to come to auction was Minotaure sulla riva del mare, which is the largest work by Mohassess to come to auction. It was the first time we include an Iranian artist in a London evening sale. So it was an extremely important moment for me and for the market. The importance of including an artist from a regional market into an international London evening auction is huge because it brings a different set of collectors to pay attention to the artist. And actually we had one bidder that had never heard of Mohassess, and they wanted to bring the work into their surrealist collection. It sort of testified of the importance and rarity of this work. It is probably his most striking and gripping work. You'll see a real difference in composition in 70s. His minotaurs are strong, they're powerful, and I think that is the real difference between 60s and 70s Mohassess, where I think he really found maybe his voice, and the shape and the form and the posture of the miniature really changes. An important aspect also of these paintings you'll notice is a lot of the figures are feetless, and I think that's a great analogy to Mohassess feeling unrooted, not really knowing where he belongs. And again, you see a lot of his own personal angst and questioning about his place on this earth and society throughout his paintings. But this work came at auction, and it was in March 2021, and it made $1.3 million. It's the third most expensive Iranian artwork ever sold. It's still the highest value Mohassess ever sold on the market, but also it's top 5 most expensive artwork sold from the Middle East. So it was a huge deal, and that was a great example of how we can negotiate some of these ownership issues and bring two families together. Mohassess's works are very rare to come to market in general, not only auctions. And I'm proud to say that Sotheby's holds 9 of the 10 most expensive, most important works to come to market. We were ecstatic about the results, and it really set a new benchmark for the artist at auction. Not a lot of books exist around Mohassess, so I think throughout this journey and uncovering these works and working on these collections, you really fill in the gaps in your understanding of an artist that still remains, despite all of this, one of the most mysterious artists from our region. As a proud Persian whose parents fled during the revolution, it brought me back to my home country and to my culture and the great artists that come from there.
Thank you for joining us on The Specialist. This has been brought to you by Sotheby's Financial Services. SFS offers asset-based loans to unlock the value of your fine art, automobiles, and other luxury collectibles. To step further into the world of Sotheby's, visit any one of our galleries, which are open to the public. Go to sotheby's.com to find out more.